Hello and welcome to Minukuu tutorials. In today's tutorial, I'm going to show you how to perform pair t-test in R or RStudio, depending on whichever one that you are using. Now, for all subscribers of Minukuu tutorials, you would bear with me that I previously made a video on how to perform two sample t-tests for independent samples or independent groups. This was a detailed presentation on t-tests in general. And if you haven't yet watched that particular video, I would suggest you look right below in the description box of this particular video, and you would find a link to the two sample t-tests for independent groups, because this would give you a better understanding of t-tests in general. In our today's tutorial, we're going to look at how to perform a pair t-test in R or RStudio, as the video title suggests. Now, the concept of pair t-test is just the same as the concept, or if you want, similar to the concept of a two sample t-test for independent groups. However, with regards to pair t-test, we actually seek to compare the means of two given populations, just as in two sample t-tests for independent samples. However, with regards to pair t-test, we're going to create the two groups or populations that we seek to test. We're going to create them from a single drawn sample. Okay, if that makes sense. So it's not even like this. Yeah, let's put it that way. So we have a single sample, and based on this sample, which means, for instance, if we have a sample of, let's say, 10 individuals, or let's say 20 individuals, and now we want to test two populations, right? Unlike in t-test for independent groups, where we were supposed to have drawn two separate samples, the advantage of a pair t-test is that we're going to have just a single sample, and we will create our test groups from this single sample. So usually a better way of doing that is to do what we call a before and after study, which means, for instance, let's assume we want to test the effectiveness of a particular drug. Okay, so let's say diabetic drug. We could measure, let's say, the blood glucose level before treatment, and then after the administration of the diabetic drug, anti-diabetic drug, we're gonna measure again the blood sugar levels. So we're gonna compare the mean blood sugar level before administration of the anti-diabetic drug and that of the after anti-diabetic drug administration. So that is a before and after study. So at the end of the day, we have two groups: before treatment and after treatment. Another good example could be, let's assume that we want to measure the influence, or if you want, the impact of corticosteroid drugs in obesity, for instance. Okay, because generally it has been proven that corticosteroids increase body weight. It affects your metabolism and whatever. Now, if we want to test that, what could we do? We could simply, for instance, measure the BMI, the body mass index of people before the administration. Let's say people before they underwent corticosteroid treatment. So we might have measured their BMI, their body mass index. Then after the administration of corticosteroid, that after they have undergone corticosteroid treatment for some time, then we're going to measure again their body mass index. Now we have body mass index before treatment and body mass index after treatment. Now, based on these two groups, so now the group of before treatment and after treatment are said to be what? It's as if we had created two samples. So we have a sample of before treatment and a sample of after treatment. Now these two samples or groups are said to be paired because they are actually created from the same number of individuals. So what that means is, before treatment, individual number 1 is going to have a value. After treatment, the same individual is going to have another value. Individual number 2 has a value for before treatment, and at the same time he has a value for after treatment. This is what we refer to as paired groups. Now, with that being said, we're going to read our data set into R and we'll start the test. The data set that we are going to use is actually a frame data set. I actually created it myself. So it's a CSV file. Now simply read into R using the read.csv command. So let me simply highlight this and then execute. Then we're going to start a test. Okay. Now, after reading my data set into R, if I want to visualize the data, then we say print into brackets data, and that shows the data set. Alright, so we have our data set here of 20 individuals who underwent corticosteroid treatment. So we have pre-corticosteroid and post-corticosteroid, that was after the treatment. And the aim is to test whether corticosteroids actually affect body weight. So the aim is to compare the mean body mass index of people after taking corticosteroids, that's pre-corticosteroids, to the mean body mass index after taking corticosteroid, that is post-corticosteroids. And it's very simple. Like every other test, before you perform the test, it's important that you verify that the test conditions are met, because t.test is actually a parametric test, which means it's based on certain assumptions on the population distribution. Usually we assume normal distribution of the two groups or the two populations that we are going to compare. So for that matter, we have to verify the conditions first. And before that, let's attach our data set. So we simply say attach into brackets data to attach our data set. And after attaching our data set, like I said, the first step is to verify the test conditions. The second step is to explore our data by simply examining a plot of the data, usually a box plot in this case. And after which we're going to formulate our hypothesis, we're going to perform the test, and then we're going to interpret the results. Okay, starting with verification of the test conditions. Like I said, this is the first and most important step of any statistical test procedure. Now, with regards to pair t-test, or if you want two sample t-test for paired groups, it's important that the differences between the two groups follow a normal distribution. Now, this is the most important. There are other conditions, but all boils down to this particular one. So it's important that the differences between the two groups actually follow a normal distribution, which means if I should pick the values of post-corticosteroids minus the values of pre-corticosteroids, all the values that I'm going to get, these differences must follow a normal distribution. Now, how do we calculate the differences between post-corticosteroids and pre-corticosteroids? To do that is very simple. We create a new variable that we call differences. To create this variable, we simply say, let me go down. So I'll simply say data, which is our data set. Then I'll use the $sign to select to create a new variable. So this new variable we call differences. So we simply say differences. Differences, okay. Then we equate it to post-cortical storage. So let me simply copy it here. Okay, so I'll simply copy this particular variable here. Let me copy it. So it's actually post-cortical storage minus pre-cortical storage. And that will give us the differences between the two groups. This is the first and the most important condition that must be met. Now, if I should run this particular formula, okay, now let's print our data set once again, and you realize that a new variable has been created named differences. Look at it here. So we have the new variable created called differences. Okay, now this particular new variable that has been created, the condition is that this variable differences must follow a normal distribution, or at least its distribution must be more or less normal. It must follow the Gaussian law or distribution law to some extent. So how do we verify that? There are different ways of verifying normality. Okay, you could use a QQ plot. The simplest test that we could use, statistical test that we could use, is the Shapiro-Wilks test of normality. Now, to do the Shapiro-Wilks test of normality, to know whether the differences between the two groups, that is post-cortical storage and pre-cortical storage, whether these differences actually follow a normal distribution, we simply use a Shapiro-Wilks test. Now, performing the Shapiro-Wilks test, you would need a package called car, like the car that you drive, CAR. So you simply say install .packages into brackets, into quotations, then you write CAR to install your package car. I've already installed it, so I don't need to repeat the process. And after installing car, you load into your R library by simply saying library into brackets CAR. I've done that one too, but if you want, I'll still load it. So I simply load it, and after loading the package car, this package contains the shapiro.test command that we use to perform the Shapiro's test of normality. Now all you have to do is to simply say shapiro.test into brackets data $difference, and the purpose of this is to simply test whether the differences between the two groups before and after treatment actually follow the normal distribution law. So we simply do shapiro.test into brackets data $difference. Or if you don't want to use the $, then we could have just done it this way. Let me erase this. We could just go back and attach our data set. After creating the new variable, we created a new variable called difference, which is actually the difference between post-cortical storage body mass index minus pre-cortical storage body mass index. So after doing this, let's attach our data set once again so that R will recognize the new variable that we have created. Okay, now after attaching the data set, we can simply go ahead and then perform our Shapiro-Wilks test. So I'm actually going to say shapiro.test into brackets, then I will simply say differences. This, when you attach your data set, it actually saves a lot of time. So instead of saying data $differences, I just write differences and we are through to go. Now it gives us a p-value of what? We're actually going to test the null hypothesis, and the null hypothesis is that the distribution of our sample distribution is similar to a normal distribution. Okay, so based on the Shapiro-Wilks test, or if you want the population distribution, the population that we are testing, we are assuming that its distribution is similar, if not the same, as a normal distribution or Gaussian distribution. And if you look at the p-value, it's actually 0.7, which is greater than 0.05, which means we cannot reject our null hypothesis, which suggests that our sample distribution of our population, the population that we are testing, actually follows a normal distribution. So we can go ahead with our our pair t-test. So since the p-value is greater than 0.05, we cannot reject the null hypothesis, which suggests that our population distribution is similar to a Gaussian or a normal distribution. Now, with that being said, we can go ahead and then explore our data set using a box plot. Why is this important? Because we don't just perform a statistical test for no reason. Usually we perform statistical tests by formulating hypotheses based on sample observations. So how do we observe our samples? By calculating certain parameters. Sometimes it could involve a graphical exploration or examination of our data. And then when we observe our data graphically, it could prompt us to now, or it could guide us in formulating our test hypothesis. So let's now see, because it's when we observe a difference in our sample that we're going to try to test this difference in the real population by carrying out a statistical test. So a simple way of examining our data with a plot is by using a box plot. All right, so if we just say box plot into brackets, then we're going to have the box plot of, let's say, body mass index of patients before corticosteroid treatment and after corticosteroid treatment. Remember, the purpose of this particular test that I'm doing is to know whether corticosteroids significantly affect the body mass index of patients. In other words, is corticosteroid actually related to obesity or body weight gain? Okay, so now we're gonna have our box plot. Okay, now this is our box plot right here, and by looking at the box plot, what can we see? We can see clearly that number one is the pre-corticosteroid treatment, that is before corticosteroid treatment. You realize that before corticosteroid treatment, the patients generally had lower body mass index values, but after the corticosteroid treatment, they had higher body mass index values. And as you can see, the median corticosteroid value of the median body mass index within the post-corticosteroid group is actually above, or if you want, greater than the median of that of the pre-corticosteroid group, the median body mass index of the pre-corticosteroid group. If you want to, if the box plot is not still clear for you, if you cannot see this clearly, this is actually the median, this is the minimum, this is the first quantile, this is the median or the second quantile, this is the third quantile, and this is the maximum. So you can see that the median here is above the median of the pre-group. The post-group, the median body mass index is above the median of the body mass index of the pre-group. If you want, you could use a summary command. Okay, so you can just say summary. If you want the values of the median, the mean, and everything, just say summary into brackets. You want to summarize, let's say pre-corticosteroid. So let me copy this and paste it here, and let's do the same for post-corticosteroid. Summary to brackets post-corticosteroid. Let me copy this one here and just paste it. Now if I should run these two codes, okay, by observing here you realize that that of median of pre-corticosteroid is what? Is 18. That of post-corticosteroid is 19.5, which means the patients after taking corticosteroids generally had body mass gain, or if you want the weight gain, right? So we could assume that obesity in these patients is probably related to the fact that they are taking corticosteroids. And if you also look at the mean here is 18.4. The mean within the post group is 20.45. However, so based on these differences, we could formulate a hypothesis that, okay, we could have our null hypothesis that median body mass mean, because we are testing means, okay, so we could formulate that by generally when mean increases, we should expect median to also increase, because these are measures of central tendency. Okay, now we could formulate our hypothesis that the body mass index, the mean body mass index of the pre-corticosteroid group would be less than, within the real population of people who do not take corticosteroid, would be less than what? The body mass index of the real population of patients who take what? Corticosteroids. Now, but somebody could also observe and say, you know what, this difference is not that much. 18.4 and 20 is almost the same. So let's simply formulate our hypothesis. We try to conduct, let's say, a two-tailed test. So our null hypothesis H0 is that mean population body mass index of the pre-corticosteroid group, pre-cortico, let me just do it this way, will be equal to corticosteroid will be equal to the mean body mass index of what? The post corticosteroid group, corticosteroid group. I'm not trying to, like, I'm just trying to I'm abbreviating everything. I don't want to write a lot of stuff. So let's go to the alternative hypothesis. Will be that, but remember, based on our sample observations, we said mean of this would have been what? Less than that. But for me, looking at these two differences, 18.4, because we could just say this just because we did sampling, but maybe in a real population the difference would not be that much significance. So we could assume that within the real population the means are actually the same. And then the alternative hypothesis is that the means are actually not the same. So it's either greater than or less than, but it's not, they are not equal. So if they are not equal, it's either greater than or what? Or less than. You could formulate your hypothesis in whichever way that you want. We could have said that mean of this is less than this, which means this one will be what? Greater than or equal to, which will be a bilateral test. That's a two-tailed test. If I had said that this one is either less than or equal to, then this one would have been what? Greater than. If it's greater than, then it means it will be a right-tailed test, a unilateral test. If I had said this one was so it depends on how you formulate your hypothesis. But for the meantime, let's say this is equal to, so this one will be either greater than or less than, and it's actually a two-tailed test. Two.tailed test. Now let's go ahead and perform our t-test. To perform our paired t-test is very simple. We're going to use t.test into brackets, then we put our before and after treatment. So we will just paste let me copy all of this: post-cortical steroid and pre-cortical steroid and post-cortical steroid. So I paste it here, then I'll put comma, and then I have to indicate the mean difference within the rate population. So we are assuming that since we are saying that mean pre-cortical steroid is equal to mean post-cortical steroid, and what that means is that the mean difference here will be what? 0. So mean difference mu will be equal to 0. But if we had said this was less than this, then we would have been obliged to give a difference of less than 0, maybe negative something, you know. So but since I said they are equal, then we suggest that suggests that mean post-cortical steroid minus mean pre-cortical steroid will give us 0. So we indicate here that mu is actually equal to 0, mean difference equal to 0, and then we're going to indicate our alternative hypothesis. Now our alternative hypothesis alt will be equal to what? A two-sided test, since we are saying it's either greater than or less than. So in quotations, two-sided in quotations, then we put comma, and then we have to also enter what we call the most important thing. This is what actually justifies that we are, if not by default, it will perform t-test for independent groups. So we must indicate that paired is equal to true for it to perform a paired t-test. And then our level of confidence generally by default is 95%. So if we don't put it, it's okay, but we could still say conf is equal to 0.95%, and we are true to go. What is most important is you could have just entered this and this, and then you simply come and enter paired is equal to true. The rest of the things that I've entered are actual default. Okay, and after doing that, it gives us a p-value of what? 0.004. 0.004 is actually less than what? 0.05, our alpha, which means we have to reject the null hypothesis, which means the alternative hypothesis is what we're gonna take. Okay, now the alternative hypothesis is that the what should I say, the mean the pre-cortical steroid group actually has higher body mass, higher BMI, the mean BMI of the group that do not take corticosteroids actually it's actually lower than that of the group that takes, or if not lower, but maybe higher. But in this case we cannot say lower, because when we calculated the sample differences, we realized that, or even if when we did our box plot, we realized that the post group had higher BMI values. So this simply suggests that the alternative hypothesis is what we're gonna conclude our test based on the alternative hypothesis by saying that based on our statistical test, since the p-value, so let's look at the interpretation. Based on our statistical test, we realize that p-value is actually what? The p-value is actually less than 0.05, which means we can conclude the mean BMI, body mass index, of people that take corticosteroids is greater than that of those, or you could say of the population of people, but it's this tautology of people. So we are actually doing not, we are talking about the real population. In the real world, people who take corticosteroids or who do not take corticosteroids have lower BMI than those that take corticosteroids, than that of those that do not. And this marks the end of our t-test for paired groups. Thank you so much for watching, and please subscribe.